He is a left-handed frisbee thrower. Let's welcome Peter to the stage.
Alright guys, I can't promise the backflip right now just because of all the equipment, but maybe later in the atrium. Hang on a second, I gotta grab the clicker. Alright, so today, wait, is this one on?
Yeah.
Okay. Today I'm talking about faith, and it's going to be focused around Hebrews 11. So, the main talking points are, what is faith, why is faith important, and what does faith look like in our lives? So there's going to be 4 main takeaways. First takeaway is that faith is founded around a substance. Second one is the difference between belief and faith. The third one is that faith will change your life. And the last one is that your faith will be tested. So before we get into the biblical definition of faith, we're first going to cover some common misconceptions about what faith is not. So things that faith is not belief without lack of evidence. This is a very common misconception, especially that people that don't believe in God and don't have faith will say, like, how could I believe anything without evidence? And I would agree with them that would be not very logical, I guess. But so the second one is that faith is not just an intellectual agreement. Like, it's not just a nod to say, yes, oh, I believe this. Because the most common example, like, even the devil believes in God, but that does not mean he has faith in God. And then faith is also not a feeling or an emotion. And faith is also not wishful thinking. So, what does the Bible say about faith? It's found in Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1 through 3. It says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. So yeah, I don't know about you guys, but the first time I read this, I was very much confused. And well, even coming into this talk, I was like, oh, faith seems like it's something that's pretty simple, right? And the more I learned about it, the more complicated it became. And actually today I was sitting here trying to think about, how am I going to explain this verse? And definitely not procrastinating, I opened up YouTube. And so this is the first video that came up. And I thought this guy, he did a very good job of explaining it, which I cannot do, so I brought him in to talk to you guys.
I think Hebrews 11:1 proves faith is just wishful thinking. For example, atheist Dan Barker tweeted, if faith is the substance of things hoped for, then everyone who buys a lottery ticket should be a winner. So if you wish for something to come true, then it will come true. But this is not what Hebrews 11:1 teaches. When you actually read the context, you see faith is trusting God to faithfully fulfill his future promise because you have good reason to do so. An illustration might help. When I was a teenager, my dad offered to pick me up from a party. He said, Tim, give me a call when you're done and I'll come get you. The ride home was his future promise, the thing hoped for. Even though I hadn't received the ride home, I had faith it would happen. Why? Was it wishful thinking? No. I had assurance of a future promise, a thing hoped for, because I had evidence from past experience. In other words, I had good reason to trust my dad would fulfill his promise to me. That's what Hebrews 11:1 is all about.
So yeah, he explained it very well. It's not about that it's based off a lack of evidence. It's that you're sure something's going to happen, even though you don't see it yet, because of the quality of the person that told it to you. So then that brings us to this slide, which faith is based on a substance. So naturally, that substance has to be meaningful for the faith to be meaningful. So for example, you can have big faith in little substance and it'll produce little results. And that's seen in 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 27. The Israelites were, as they commonly do, trying to worship false gods. In this case, it was Baal. And they were trying to call on his name to light a fire for a sacrifice to a bull. And then, so verse 27 says, at noon, Elijah began to taunt them. Shout louder, he said. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened. And then later on in verse 29, it says, but there was no response. No one answered, and no one paid attention. So as we can see, the Israelites had great faith. Like, they stood out, cheered, and danced for said to early morning till noon, so at least like 6 hours, and nothing came as a result. So then naturally we'd assume that little faith and a big substance would produce a big result. This is seen in Matthew 17, verse 20. The disciples had come to Jesus and they were discouraged because they couldn't cast out demons, and Jesus' reply was, "Because you have so little faith. Truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." So this verse pretty clearly states, like, even a little faith in a substance as big as God will produce massive results. So now we're going to get into the first point, which is, this is the second point. The difference between belief and trust, or belief and faith. So, as it says, you can believe something is true, but that does not mean you have faith in it. As I stated earlier, like, even the devil believes in God, but that doesn't mean he has faith in God. So belief does not equal faith, but faith does need belief in order for it to be valid, because it can kind of be hard to have faith in something that you don't believe in. And the most basic analogy is a chair. So we can imagine a chair is here. I can see the chair is there. I can acknowledge the chair's existence. I can believe that the chair will hold my weight when I sit on it. But unless I actually go to sit in the chair, I don't have any faith in that chair until that action appears. So then the second point is that faith will change your life. Real faith will change your life. So I believe that faith is not only a noun, but it's also a way of life or an action. And this is backed up in Habakkuk 2, verse 4. "See, the enemy is puffed up. His desires are not upright, but the righteous person will live by his faithfulness." As we can see from this verse, the righteous person will live by their faithfulness. And then, so if the righteous person is going to live by their faithfulness, that would mean that faith without works is dead. And this is seen in James chapter 2, verses 14 through 17, and it states, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead." Further emphasized in James 2, verse 26, is basically the same point. He states, "As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead." But it's important to remember to not confuse this with the fact that we're not saved by our works, but we're saved through grace. This is emphasized in Ephesians 2, verses 8 and 9. "For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast." So we're saved by the grace of God, and because of that, we do have faith, and we're saved through our faith. And our faith produces works, but it's not the works that save us, it's only the grace of God, and then enacted through our faith. So the next and final point of what faith is, well, not really what faith is, but a fact about faith, is that your faith will definitely be tested as you walk with Christ. This is seen in James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." And then 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 6 through 7. "In all of this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even through refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed." So we can see from both these verses that our faith will be tested, and not only just to be aware that our faith will be tested, but to take great joy when our faith is tested, because that means what it says in Peter, greater worth than gold, and will result in praise, honor, and glory when Jesus Christ is revealed. So now we're finally going back to Hebrews, where the rest of the chapter highlights, I'd say, pretty much every character in the Old Testament and some great works that they have accomplished. So the first one is Abel. And he offered a better sacrifice than Cain and was approved as righteous, in verse 4. The second one was Enoch. He was taken up by God to be in heaven, in verse 5. The next one is Noah, which we all know. Noah built the massive ark and survived the flood. That's in verse 7. The next was Abraham. He set up for his inheritance without knowing where he was going. That's in verse 8. And he even offered up his own son to death in verse 11. No, verse 17. So the next one was Sarah. She received the power to conceive offspring even though she was past the age of being able to have offspring. That's in verse 11. The next one is Isaac, who blessed Jacob and Esau. That was in verse 20. And the last one is Moses. Everyone knows who Moses is. He did a lot of very amazing things. Probably the most notable was his crossing of the Red Sea, and Hebrews mentions that in verse 29. And then it even goes on further, 32 through 23, Paul writes, "And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, about David, Samuel, and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, and so on and so forth." So we can see through the rest of this passage in Hebrews that all these people accomplished amazing feats. And the only thing that all these people had in common, other than they were sinners and in need of the grace of God, is that they all accomplished these things through the faith, as it's seen in verse 33. It says, through faith they conquered kingdoms. And in every passages that mention every one of these people, so that they're only able to do it through their faith, which is emphasizing the importance of our faith. So then, that leads us to, what does faith look like in our lives? So, to put it very simply, living out faithful lives is living and acting like God is telling the truth. So, I'd like to make a challenge to you guys and ask this question. How are you taking intentional steps to live out a faithful life? See, I'll be quick to admit that this is something that I often lack in, where I always try to find myself leaning on my own understanding. I'll find myself very anxious all the time, and I'll be worried about what tomorrow is going to bring. However, accepting this talk was an act of faith for me. For when I accepted this talk, I had no idea what I wanted to talk about. I felt that I was very bad at public speaking, and I had a really busy schedule with taking 18 credits and working a job and being involved in 2 clubs. So I was like, how am I ever going to get this done? But God made a way, and I had faith that He would provide and make a way for it to happen, and here I am. And that's the end.
Thank you, Peter. Great talk. I never thought about faith in that way. That analogy with your dad picking up was really good.